Time to introduce our guest today. We have Kat Stratford, works for Ward 2 on Tucson's Homeless Outreach Program. She will speak about the program and the work she does with Tucson's homeless citizens. Kat is an outspoken advocate for victims of violent crime and disabled persons. She has volunteered with homicide survivors since 2013, and she became a certified rape crisis advocate at the SACASA in 2014. Kat ran as a candidate for state representative in 2022 from LD 18, coming within a few hundred votes of victory in the five-way primary. Let's give Kat Stratford a very warm welcome to the Democrats of Greater Tucson.
Thank you guys so much. I was kind of panicking right before this meeting going, what can I say at all about me that's interesting? But you've covered everything. Thank you so much, Joe. So in addition to everything that Joe said, I am also a mom of two incredible kids, one of whom is trans. My entire family are survivors of sexual and domestic violence, and that is actually what drove us into the political arena. That is why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. In addition to all of that, I'm also deaf. You may not notice it to hear me speak, but I actually, without my hearing aids, can't even hear fire alarm. So that's been a big adjustment that has just come within the last few years. But rolling with the punches is what we do here. So my position with the Ward 2 office was actually created specifically for me and for that particular office. I am the homeless outreach specialist for that office to deal with the emergency of homelessness. We've got a couple people in our audience today who can even tell you a little bit about what I do. Hi, Pat. We just did a cleanup in Pat's neighborhood recently, actually. So what I basically do is an extension of housing and community development, which is a department created by Regina Romero to also address the emergency of homelessness. They also work in conjunction with the department called Community Safety, Health, and Wellness. And that department deals with people who are possibly homeless, but not necessarily unsheltered, like couch surfing, basically, as well as people who are dealing with housing insecurity, food insecurity, and potentially like mental disabilities that might endanger their housing situation and stability. So I trained with both of those departments in order to learn what I do. In addition to that, I actually experienced homelessness as a teenager. And so I'm bringing my own personal experience into this position. I get a lot of questions about the specifics about what I do. So I'm going to try and keep this a little bit shorter so that you guys can ask as many questions as you want, because I know that there's things you guys are going to think of that I'm not going to think of. But the basic in and out of what I do is I actually use a list that is given to me of assignments. In the city website, there's a tool called the Homeless Encampment Reporting Tool. If you go in there and make a report of a camp, that is something that will get added to my list if it's in Ward 2. So I basically open up the application that does that, and I check out sites and the reports, and I actually go and visit homeless encampments. I am one of the very, very, very few women who do this kind of work, because it's generally regarded as being kind of dangerous to visit homeless encampments by myself. I actually often have a dog with me. His name is Timber. He's actually sleeping on the couch. I'm looking right at him. He couldn't care less about what I'm talking about. But I often travel with him as, kind of a security measure. But for the most part, I really don't need any security. This work sounds very dangerous, but for the most part, if you use your instincts and, just practice general safety, it's not actually that bad. The vast majority of the people that I encounter in homeless encampments are completely wonderful and are just having a hard time, for a million different reasons. So I go and I visit the camps, and then I submit what's called a harm survey. And in that, I answer questions about whether or not the camp is occupied, how many people are there. Are these people from marginalized communities? Is anybody in immediate danger, including the surrounding community? Because sometimes what will have happen is a camp will pop up and it'll be, up against the gate of a school. And so obviously that's a situation where we need to intervene right away. And so through that assessment process, I assign a tier recommendation. We have a 3-tier system. Tier 1 is a camp that is not occupied, it's been abandoned, or it possibly wasn't ever a camp. We have what's called flop sites, and those are areas where people are hanging out during the day. And so we might have debris, but it's not a place where people are sleeping. So we have those tier 1s, and that is just in order to go pick up the trash or debris or whatever. A tier 2 is a situation where the camp is stable, and we want to get them into services. So we start the relationship building process and we don't evict them from the site. We go out every 2 weeks. That is the measure of time that we have between visits. And the measure of time is actually only that long because we have so many sites that we're trying to visit. I currently have over 30 assignments on my list. And there are 5,000 reports within the city of Tucson. So my little piece is just a small piece of a much larger project. But so for a tier 2, we just keep going out. We bring them trash bags, we bring water, and we also enlist environmental services to help us with cleaning up these sites, but not clearing out. A tier 3 is the situation I mentioned previously, where there is something that is so wrong that we need to intervene immediately. A lot of times this means posting a 72-hour notice. I get a lot of questions about this process because people do kind of assume that when we clear out a camp, that we're not giving anybody any notice or any time to collect their belongings. We always endeavor to get people into services to help them get their belongings. We do not want to trash somebody's stuff if it can possibly be avoided. But there are situations where we do have to intervene for the safety of the surrounding community and sometimes even for the safety of the campers in these encampments. So we post a 72-hour notice in those cases, and I actually go out each day before that notice is enforced to try and get folks into services, because it does actually take some time to build that relationship and let people know, like, I know you've had bad interactions with community or with government workers before, and this is not that. I promise we're just trying to help. Our philosophy, sorry, I have a special guest star. Our philosophy is that housing first is the best route to take. I get a lot of questions like, why can't these people just get jobs? Why can't these people just do this or that? And the answer is pretty simple. Without the stability of a roof over your head, it's really hard to get anything else together. So, you can't get clean, you can't get sober, you can't get a job without that first initial step. Sorry, he's now trying to eat my microphone. But so those are the philosophies that we have. We really strive for housing first, and we offer all kinds of services. I'm even going to be following up with somebody who I met on Friday at a flop site by contacting his case manager with another agency. So that's the kind of work that we do. And yeah, I guess I will just open it up to questions now.
Susie Anderson, you have a question for Kat.
I do. At our Drinking Democratically one month, I brought in some bandages, ointment, antiseptic ointments, things like that that I had gathered and went out to buy. And do you need things like that? I thought we did it for Paul Cunningham, but it may have been for someone else. But do you need donations of those kinds of things?
Yes, absolutely. So there is a special outreach nurse that visits from El Rio at Casa Maria every Tuesday. I try to drop off supplies to that nurse each week. So everything that we get for that is just phenomenal. Thank you so much. The injuries that some people are living with are horrific. And so anything that we can do to try and treat is amazing. In addition to that, the reason that I actually first started collecting medical supplies was because there was a client with Community Safety, Health, and Wellness who had a wound that needed special wound care, but there was no way to get this person the wound care they needed because the cost was too much. And so we were just trying to get supplies for that. And that really opened my eyes to how prevalent those kinds of medical issues are within the homeless community. And that is like people who are, in transitional housing to people who are actually unsheltered. Those injuries can be horrific. A lot of people are living with chronic illnesses, like diabetes is a big one. That one is really common. So all of those supplies really do make a difference.
Okay, Larry has a question. Larry?
Yeah, I just wanted to applaud everything you do. It's really an essential service, and I'm just so happy that you're actively doing it. I too have donated antiseptics and soap and Gatorade to the at Drinking Democratically to go to the homeless. So my question is, Republicans consider homeless people to be a public nuisance. For example, Senator Justine Wadsack would like to jail the homeless and put them into private prisons so they can increase their profits. And I think they lack empathy. Would you describe what a typical day is for a homeless person, like when they get up, middle of the day, afternoon? What's a day in the life of a homeless person?
So that's a great question, but it's one that has about a gajillion different answers because there are no two unsheltered people who are living identical lives. There is one thing that a lot of homeless people have in common, and I'm sure you can all guess it. There are a large amount of drugs out right now. We have seen in the last 3 years a huge explosion of fentanyl. And so one thing that I'm dealing with day to day is people who are on those substances. And a lot of the day to day actually revolves around acquiring those substances. Now, what we're seeing now with the fentanyl explosion is actually combined drug use. It used to be like this side of 10 years ago, if you were on downers like fentanyl, you would be on downers. You wouldn't also be on uppers like meth. But now, because fentanyl is such a powerful drug that kind of just locks you down for so many hours, we're seeing now combined drug use. There's even a posture associated with that combined drug use, which is a very slouched, like hunched over position that only really comes from using these two drugs at the same time over a long period. So a lot of the day-to-day actually is involved in that. But for the most part, any unsheltered person you encounter is not trying to bug you or do anything. A lot of people just want to be left alone. And that's why so many camps are confined to washes. I did see a question about the Alamo Wash. I do have an answer for that question. but like a lot of homeless encampments are confined to washes because that's as close as we can get to underground. If you are looking to travel unseen, that's the way to do it. So, and that's why there are so many homeless encampments in washes, because these folks are really trying to just get by and be left alone.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
time to answer our friend from the media, Tim Steller's question about the Alamo Wash.
I didn't see that it was from Tim. Hey, Tim. So to answer your question, we actually have a very strong advocate for our homeless community. His name is Charlie Allen, and he has always been one of our superstar volunteers. Unfortunately, now this didn't happen in my ward, so I don't know the full story. I was not there for the full thing, but so this group that Charlie Allen was a part of had been working with a homeless encampment in Alamo Wash. They had been working with them for many weeks, I think possibly even months. These guys were in services. They had like case managers through Kodak and stuff like that. So that's one of the main reasons that we don't want to move camps unless we have to, because, you know, when people are in services, we don't want to lose track of them. We don't want their case managers to not be able to find them. That small piece of stability might be the only thing they have. So unfortunately, I do not know the nature of why the police swept this wash at all. But unfortunately, the wash was swept, and those campers that had been in services were in the wind following that. And that's one of the reasons that only TPD's homeless protocol can do those sweeps now. As far as I know, like, I don't want to say something that I'm not supposed to say because I don't work with TPD on a regular basis, but to the best of my knowledge, only TPD's homeless outreach team can do those sweeps.
Okay, Mike, did you have any other questions in the chat room?
Following on that, Mr. Benson would like to know what is the relationship with TPD, if any, between, I assume, your task force and the Tucson Police Department task force?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. So there are two units that we work with. The homeless outreach unit, which is headed up by Sergeant Jack Jolsing. And this is just a funny aside, has absolutely no relevance. But if you've ever met me in person, you know that I'm 4'11". Sergeant Jack is 6'8". So just kind of comical anytime we have to work together because we look like we might be different species or something. But so his team is great. They have a very empathetic viewpoint when working with homeless folks. So that's fantastic. And then the other unit that we work with is the mental crisis unit headed up by Jason Winsky. That unit's been around since about 2012, and they're doing tremendous work in training officers in how to de-escalate situations that involve people with mental instability. So those are the two units that we work with. It is unlike any other kind of police interaction I've ever had before. So it's really lovely to work with people who actually want to help. And that is what I've gotten from TPD thus far. There's plenty of pushback in the department against this kind of work. Plenty of people have the same viewpoint as Justine Wadzak, that these people don't deserve to be treated like people. But fortunately for me and for the people that I'm working with every day, the units at TPD that do this work do see these people as people. They do have that empathic point.
More questions, Mike?
Yeah, did Kat freeze up there a little bit? Oh, she's back. All right. Chris Hawkins would like to know what your advice is for talking about these issues and advocating for homeless people with local politicians.
Oh, I love this question. Thank you so much, Chris. in talking about these issues, I encourage people to use specific language. I personally use the phrase unsheltered to really emphasize the fact that, like, these are people who do not have a roof over their heads. The phrase homeless has just become such a way to otherize the unsheltered community. And so I really encourage adopting that language to talk about it. But then additionally, we have to make it clear, the vast majority of unsheltered folks did not develop a drug habit and then become homeless. They became homeless and then developed a drug habit. So it's really important to not see these people solely as addicts, but as people who are just like you and me. These are real people who had a couple bad breaks that rendered them without a home, without a roof over their head. And it could happen to you as easily as it could happen to them. A lot of people think that that they have as much in common with Elon Musk as opposed to these unsheltered folks. But no, you have far more in common with any unsheltered person than you will ever have with a billionaire. The truth is that we are all just a few bad breaks away from that existence. And I think that's something really important. And when we talk to politicians about this issue, we need to focus on decriminalizing homelessness, because throwing people in jail will not fix the problem as much as Justine Wadzak wants it to. That will actually just worsen the problem. The vast majority of the unsheltered people that I've encountered either have warrants, have been in jail. They have been in the judicial system, and it's not helping them, it's hurting them. So I guess that is what I would say.
Yeah. I do have a question of my own. I would like to know your sense of what proportions of people that you encounter are elderly, disabled, having mental health issues, are families who, people who might not fit your stereotypical image that you get when you say homeless or unsheltered.
Oh, the vast majority of unsheltered folks are from marginalized communities. So just to give like a brief example, in the United States, Black Americans make up 13% of the population. When you look at the unsheltered numbers, they make up 40% of the population, and that's not by accident. And you can actually repeat that process by looking at the statistics of Indigenous folks who are unsheltered, the number of LGBTQ folks who are unsheltered, disabled, the list goes on. Any marginalized community has a much higher percentage of presence in the unsheltered community.
Well, I want to leave space for other people's questions, but I do have more questions. If nobody's raising their hands at this point, I would like to ask, you say that people go out and reach out to these people with services. Can you describe the kind of services you're talking about when you say they have a caseworker and they have services being provided to them in the camp?
Yes, absolutely. So when I visit a campsite, I always have a little pamphlet. Now I feel silly for not having one like right here, but I always have a little pamphlet that says need help. And it has just, a list of resources. And those resources are everything from domestic violence shelters like Emerge to food assistance, Kodak, COPE. All of those places are on that list. Now that summer is here, I'm also giving folks a list of the cooling shelters that we have in place, because the city has set up several cool spaces for people to chill out during the day. And that's so important because like I said before this meeting even began, this summer has been brutal on the unsheltered community, and due to the presence of narcotics in that community, that danger is actually increased. They're more at risk for heat stroke because of those substances, and it's terrible. And I did just see, where can we get those pamphlets? pop up in the questions, great question. You can actually get them on the city's website.
Okay, Susie, you have a question.
Yeah, you know, all of the people who stand on corners, I give them, I buy the oat and honey bars and, you know, things like that, and the soft chews that are fruit, and I give them away, you know, big handful as much as I can, and they seem to be very grateful for that. Is that a good thing that I'm doing? Or, you know, because a lot of people will just give them money.
It's a great thing that you're doing. It's a great and wonderful thing that you're doing. It really is. I can't state that enough. Whether you give money or food or water, if you are treating people in the medians and corners like a human being, I'm so grateful for you. Like that actually makes me a little bit misty. Because so many people look at these folks like they are just bums, and it's so easy to just ignore them. I see so many drivers just pretend that they can't even see them.
Yeah.
And so to just even give folks that is so wonderful. I actually travel with a cooler in my car. And in that cooler, I have water and Gatorade Zero. And of course, those pamphlets I just mentioned. So thank you so much, Susie.
Okay, second question. Since whenever the monsoon is really going to get going, if it's going to get going, the people in the washes will be in danger.
Yes.
Yeah. What's going on with that?
Well, so we actually have, so when I told you about the harm survey that we do for a camp assessment, we actually have, and this is something that we just added, I'm very excited to share with you. We actually have, is this a seasonal area of concern listed on our harm survey? And so when I'm doing that, if the camp is in a wash, or sometimes it's even in tunnels, like drainage tunnels, I always mark, yes, this is an area of seasonal concern. And currently, because monsoon season is starting, we are trying to relocate those folks as quickly as we can, just because we really do care about these folks. We care very deeply, and we don't want anybody to be in danger. So yeah, that is something that we just added onto our harm survey. So as soon as I see that, it goes right to the city.
Okay, Mike Bryan, you have some more questions.
James Hanley in the chat asked, can you tell us a little bit about the annual count? He has it in quotations as if it's like an official thing, I think.
Yes, the pit count. It is an official thing. It's called Everybody Counts. And basically, and please feel free to volunteer for this next year. We do it in January. And basically, we go out to every single camp that we can find. And we take survey data from those camps. Sometimes the most we can take is just like literally a head count. But when we occasionally find people who are willing to answer questions, then we also take that data. And that data actually goes to the state. It is a statewide thing, and it helps us get grants and funding so that we can better cope with the emergency of homelessness. So it's a super important event that happens every year in January. It's not, I had fun with it, but I don't imagine that it's everybody's cup of tea to get up at 5 a.m. in the middle of winter to go talk to a whole lot of homeless camps. But for me, like that was a great time. It was very, very cool to like have that experience. And I highly recommend it to anybody who's looking to help.
I also have a couple additional questions. Chris Hawkins wanted to follow up with whether you were aware of any bills or legislation or programs that are in process to address the homeless crisis here in Arizona and locally.
So the most recent bills that I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, are from politicians like Justine Wadzak, who wanted to just criminalize homelessness, like blanket criminalize it. And of course, I know and you know that is like the least cost-effective, most horrifying suggestion that anybody could make. So that's pretty much the legislation I've seen. And fortunately, she's alone in her thought process there. So that bill's not going anywhere. Thank goodness. But you know, that is kind of what I've seen. The stuff that's in process to actually help homeless people are things that the mayor is already doing. Like the mayor and council have just made tremendous moves on this. So the protocol that I do was only created in October of last year. So a lot of people call and ask me why it hasn't been fixed yet, and it's because we've only been here for 6 months. I'm one of the only full-time workers doing this kind of work, and because I work for the ward office and not for housing and community development, visiting camps isn't the only thing I do. I actually have several other responsibilities. I actually also run the social media for the Ward 2 office. So you know, like, it's just not a problem that can be solved overnight, but the work we're doing has been done in Houston with tremendous results. So I'm really confident in what we're doing and feel really good about it, but it's certainly not something that we can just snap our fingers and have it be gone.
Okay, Andrea, you have a question.
Hi, Kat. It's good to see you today. Actually had 2 questions. Are the unsheltered taking advantage of the cooling centers or the libraries? I always thought if I was homeless, I'd go hide in the main library on campus. It's enormous and it's easy to hide. The other one was, can you say something about these tiny little houses that I hear about? Where would they go, and do they have bathrooms?
Great questions. So as far as I know, a lot of our unsheltered people are taking advantage of the cooling centers, but I wouldn't say a majority are. Again, a lot of these things are just, frankly, a lot of people just want to be left alone, and they would rather risk heat stroke than going to something that's provided by the government. That's why the relationship building aspect of my position is so important. Because people have had bad run-ins with cops, people have had bad run-ins with government workers, and we're here saying, no, trust us this time. And of course, people are not going to be bought so easily into that. So yes, people are taking advantage of the cooling centers, but not at the rates we would like to see. We also are woefully short on those cooling centers. We need more of all of the resources. And then I apologize. The second question was in regards to, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. Can you repeat your second question?
I do the same thing. The tiny little houses that I see, I'm reading about. Maybe it was in another state, but I thought I had read something about plans to establish that here.
Yes. So there is a gentleman named John McLean who has, I think, I haven't visited the site because it's not in my ward, but he has constructed a tiny house village. Now, all of that is basically kind of theoretical at this point, because you would need special permits to house folks in those tiny house villages. It's something that we've considered. It's something that we're still looking at. In fact, there's a company that has bought some of Ducey's border wall storage units, and we're looking at spaces to put those and make them into very affordable housing. And that to me would be just the most delicious idea ever. But again, all of that's in process. Currently, there's no sanctioned city area that has tiny houses for people to live. I think the closest that we have to like any kind of a sanctioned area is a camp called 100 Acres that's over on golf links. And that's just a large camp that's been very established for a very long time. And cops do regular, not like they just drive through regularly to make sure that everything's copacetic. Environmental Services does regular pickups there. That's the closest we have to any kind of a state sanctioned area. But the tiny houses thing is like an ongoing discussion.
Hey, Mike Bryan, you have some more questions.
Yeah, Susie Anderson wonders how many of our veterans are unsheltered. And we had a question earlier, I don't remember who asked it, about pets and whether or not there's any dedicated services or funding streams for taking care of unsheltered
So
people.
glad you asked. Okay, so in Tucson, we have two types of shelters. We have high barrier shelters, and these shelters always have beds open. And a lot of people wonder, well, if Salvation Army has beds open, why are there still unsheltered people? Because that is a high barrier shelter. You have to be clean, you have to be sober, you can't bring your animals, you certainly don't get to stay with your partner or family. If you have kids, just forget it. So people would rather be unsheltered than be in a shelter like Salvation Army offers. Now we have what's called low barrier shelters. And these are things that are being provided by the city. And we have bought motels like Wildcat Inn and No-Tell Motel and turned them into homeless shelters. So this is a big deal because you can bring your pet. You can bring your family, you can bring your partner. We're not going to separate you. You don't even have to be sober to live in these spaces. You just can't do those substances on the property. That's it. So these are low barrier shelters that are constantly full. So the thing that the city is focusing on now is getting more spaces like that, because those spaces do allow people to get a fresh start. And that is a direct branch of our housing first philosophy. So yeah, excellent question. And also I did see in that question that you asked if we take pet supplies. Yes, we do. I actually travel with little doggy bags of dog food in my cooler as well to give to folks that have a dog.
Awesome. Pat, you have a question.
Well, I really don't have a question. What I have is a shout out because, as Kat mentioned earlier, my neighborhood was a recipient of her protocols. And we had two camps that were off the wash in our neighborhood area. And Kat came out and spoke with the unsheltered people in the encampment. And I want to say that she was very empathetic to them, but she's also was very empathetic to the neighborhood residents as well. And so time went on, and it turned out that it turned into a tier 3 because there was some criminal activity going on. And so teams came out, a couple of teams came out at different times and cleaned it up. They did the protocols, 72-hour, and then teams came in and cleaned it up. And I would just want to say again, thank you to her, and because we're in Ward 2 and Paul Cunningham for doing that. So thank you, Kat. A big shout out. You're doing exactly what you say you're doing, and you're very empathetic and concerned. That's really appreciated.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And actually, so Environmental Services came out and cleaned up Pat's neighborhood, but they still left a little bit behind. So Councilman Paul Cunningham and I, and like a couple people from our office, came out to clean up the rest. So when I say we're working hard and we're doing thorough work, trust, we are.
Awesome. Okay, James Hanley has a question.
Thank you so much for appearing for us today, Kat. And your competence and your empathy really shines through. Question I have is, and by the way, we had Councilman Cunningham on a few weeks ago, and he talked about that incident and how gratified he was about the work that he did for this one couple that was homeless. The question I have is about the Tucson Coalition to End Homelessness, which I think is a city-sponsored organization. Councilman Fimbres heads that up, as I understand it. And my question is that, do you interface with that group, or can you tell us something about what they do?
Actually, I don't interface with that group particularly. It's really just a matter of I believe they're doing work in a separate part of the city, so I just haven't interacted with them at all. We do get tagged a lot by several groups that are working to address homelessness, and some of them are city sanctioned, some of them are city sponsored, and some of them are suing the city. So that is pretty much how that goes. And unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to work with that group yet. But I do see that somebody just dropped the link to their resources in the chat, so I will definitely check them out.
Okay, Susie has a question.
Vets that are homeless, how big a group is that? And doesn't the VA have some way of helping these men and women?
Yes. So the veterans do make up a hefty amount of our homeless population. And yes, the VA does have resources to help them. In fact, they're listed in our pamphlets as one of the resources. However, there's just not enough resources to go around at the moment. Every single thing is just strapped for those resources. There's so much more demand than supply. And so that's pretty much what that looks like. We do actually have several groups and programs that focus specifically on homeless veterans. So it's not even just the VA. There's multiple groups doing that work. So they actually have probably more opportunity than any other marginalized group that finds themselves unsheltered because of that, because there's so many groups dedicated specifically to helping them.
Does the VA send people out at all to help the vets?
To my knowledge, the main events that I've seen with homeless veterans are like job fairs that the VA puts on, but to my knowledge, they don't have any outreach workers. There's nobody from the VA doing what I do.
One of the places where the VA does interface with homeless veterans is in Veterans Court, which is a special court through the city of Tucson to clear warrants and minor violations, lifestyle violations, they often call them, that homeless vets accumulate. They do have VA representatives there to interface with homeless veterans.
Okay, Mike, you have some more questions?
Yeah. My own question is, once somebody gets into one of these low barrier shelters, what's kind of the next step in the shelter first kind of approach to get them into more permanent housing?
See, this is why I left so much time for questions, because I knew I would not think of stuff like this. So excellent question, by the way. The way that we transition people into permanent housing starts with a 90-day cycle that begins the day that they enter into transitional housing. Now, there's a bunch of organizations who have transitional housing. So that includes International Community Bridge, or no, wait, CBI's Community Bridges Incorporated. That includes the city, and that includes just a few different organizations, so including Old Pueblo. And so they have like a 90-day cycle. Once you are in transitional housing, then you're going to be supported by other programs. This is what we call wraparound services. So once you're in transitional housing, you are assigned a case manager who's going to help you on your path forward. So ideally, what we're looking at is getting people housing vouchers so that they can transition from those transitional spaces like no-tell motel to permanent housing. And so we actually offer services for every step of the way, but it's a 90-day cycle that starts from the day they enter that housing.
Yeah, and I can tell people that the funding source for a lot of those programs is the Housing Trust Fund here in Arizona, which this year was allocated $150 million instead of $100 million due to the efforts of Democrats.
Yes. And again, that's why the PIT count in January is so important, because we need an accurate number. And, you know, I hate to say it, but our number that we came back with this year was not accurate. It was low because we didn't have enough volunteers. So, but that's why that count is so important, because we can't get the proper amount of funding without that. And so we've had shelters close this year. I literally have had people on waiting lists for months where I'm just like, going back and going back and going back and saying, this isn't the end. I promise it's coming. You're on the list. But you know, that is where that's at.
Yes, Susie. There you
Does
go.
the U.S. Census count the homeless?
Does the U.S. Census count the homeless? Great question. I actually, to my knowledge, no. They go door to door. So I'm sure you guys remember we had a census count very recently, and somebody probably knocked on your door to take your information. To my knowledge, the census has no way to track those individuals who are unsheltered, especially due to like the transient nature of camps where they are moving from place to place. So to the best of my knowledge, the U.S. Census does not count unsheltered people.
Okay, Andrea, you have another question.
Well, it's not a question. Actually, it's more a comment. I wanted to respond, but if somebody has an actual question.
Go for it.
My experience since I moved here was that there are always these little trailer parks and apartment complex and little frayed at the edges, and so were some of the people. They didn't cost very much to live. These people had a home. And I'm seeing them replaced with car dealerships and university property. And so my thesis is that this homeless problem is due to greed, is what happened, because there used to be places where you could live if you didn't make a lot of money, and some of them actually looked quite nice. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on this.
Yes, it turns out it was capitalism all along. That is what has caused the crisis that we're in. There's more facets to it than just the housing component. But yes, you are correct. Affordable housing has been replaced with non-affordable housing, and there's not a single person who hasn't been affected. Even my rent has gone up to the point where like I certainly couldn't live in the same space I was living in 2 years ago. Like that is wild to think about. Like I, as a single mom with a stable job, I have a salary and benefits. And if I were still a single mom, I would not be able to live in the apartment that I lived in. That's wild. So yeah, that is a huge component.
Okay, well, I'm just going to ask another topic, and maybe we'll have other folks who would like to ask Kat some things. Kat, you know, I know you had a great experience up at U of A coordinating voter registration. Tell us, you know, how you felt about that and how it worked.
Oh, that was a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for that. So this time last year, no, wait, It was a little bit later in the year, but I was working with Next Gen America. Next Gen is a great organization. You probably know our local celebrity, Alex Aka, the green shirt guy. He was actually my director at that position, and he was absolutely wonderful to work with. He always is. And so we were on at the U of A campus, just signing people up to vote, and getting people registered. So that was like just a fantastic experience. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And it's kind of funny. I was just working on campus and people like just assumed that I was a student there. So that was just like a funny thing that happened a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, also Next Gen changed their policies so that because while working for Next Gen, I became very, very sick. I was in and out of the hospital. It's the reason you see all these cranes behind me, because I didn't have anything else to do but fold cranes. And so as a result of that, Next Gen allowed me to start working from home to enter voter registered data and do phone banking and stuff like that. Since that happened, they have now changed their policies so that that is like the automatic go-to. Normally, if you get that sick at a job that's really only supposed to last a few months, you're going to be out of that job. In my case, I wasn't. I was able to keep my paycheck and they worked with me. And now that is a policy that they have.
Looks like Maureen Kelly asked a question. She wants to know, it sounds to her from what you've said that unsheltered people have a best chance of being helped if they live in an encampment rather than those moving place to place, stopping where they can. Is that impression that she gets true?
Yes. So obviously, if we know where folks are, that is a tremendous help. Outside of that, having somebody's contact information is also really helpful. But like I said, our goal when we go out to these camps is always to get people on a path to housing, and get people connected with the services that they need and have been deprived of. So obviously, when we know where those people are, it's that much easier to connect them with those services. When camps get swept and when the people are, essentially in the wind, it's so much harder to connect them with services. It's so much harder to make sure that people are okay. And a lot of the services that people are getting are, medical appointments and stuff like that. So it's vital to make sure that we know where people are.
Great. Mike, I think we have some more questions in the chat room.
Claudia Miller would like to know if you have a website for volunteering for the January count. If somebody could put that in the chat, that'd be appreciated. And Maureen has another question, a follow-up question, asking, other than cooling centers, what other programs are helping people, who are unsheltered stay alive?
Excellent questions. So just to address the helping people stay alive. So obviously we're doing a lot more than cooling shelters. I mean, my position is testament to that. We've created entire departments to help deal with the situation at hand, and treat it like the emergency that it is. Currently, obviously anybody can go to the hospital at any time, but our focus is on making sure that people don't need that. So, we have the cooling centers. We also have many places like Primavera has like a shelter that you can just go to during the day. And it's not technically a cooling center, but so like we have lots of those services available and we have multiple departments trying to do this work. I visited 7 campsites on Friday alone. And all of that is work dedicated to making sure that people stay alive. We're treating it with a certain amount of urgency because we see how urgent it is. In the winter, it gets very cold and that's dangerous. I have spent days where all I do is travel with FEMA blankets in my truck to deliver them to camps. And then in the summer, just as important, I'm just going around giving people water. Like that is a lot of what I do. And we also all travel with Narcan and first aid. So I've even gotten a short training on how to tell if somebody is ODing. And so, we're doing everything that we can, but the need is very great. So I'm not going to claim that we're perfect, but we are definitely trying. And then to help out with the pit count in January. So I actually don't have the website on me currently. I did not anticipate this question, and I told you guys I wouldn't. But if you want to contact me, I will get you signed up. You can, my email address, I'll just put it in the chat right now. This is my official work email, so please feel free to use it.
Awesome. Well, Leoler, welcome. You have a question?
I have a question. Yes, it's about the cooling centers. When they show them on television, they'll do a span, kind of pan through and say, and so has a cooling center open, and the hours are from 10 to 4 or something like that, maybe 10 to 5. Those aren't the hours. Those hours are too short. And I know that the city has to employ somebody to be there, but still the hours are too short for our summers, and that it doesn't even get dark until 7:30 around the solstice. So, and the other thing is that they have these uncomfortable chairs lined up, kind of reminds me when they made you wait for 15 minutes after your COVID shot. Like these are very uncomfortable chairs. There's no place. I mean, if I were in one of those places, I'd find a pillow and sleep on the floor. So I just don't know. I hope they've improved them since the last time I saw them on the news. But is there any way to make people more comfortable so they might actually come to the cooling centers?
So, like I said before, the budget is a pretty big issue. We have far more demand than supply. And so that's kind of the reason that things are the way that they are. And it is unfortunate. And I agree with you. Like, these sites should be more comfortable. Obviously, my goal 24/7 is just making sure that people are staying healthy and well. And a big part of that is, I believe that part of maintaining folks' dignity while they are on this journey is giving them the treatment that we would like to get ourselves. And so I feel very strongly about that. But I'm not the one who gets to make those calls. The hours are set from 10 to 4 or 5, because that's when we hit peak temperatures, and that's when people are in very literal danger. And so once that danger is no longer in effect, the shelters close. And I agree with you. We need more. And it's the same in winter. We have emergency freeze shelters, but again, they're only in effect when it's below 32 degrees, or if it's below 40 degrees and raining. So I completely agree. We need more. But that is actually where it is right now, is just, analyzing when somebody is in physical danger and addressing that. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add one thing before I say goodbye to everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for all these wonderful questions. Also, if you want to get involved and help, I have so many opportunities, and my email is in the chat. Please do so. This Friday, every Friday, we do what we call Community Service Friday. And this Friday, we're going to be having a lemonade stand that's also a donation drive. The lemonade is free. All you have to do is bring a donation for Strauss Manor. Strauss Manor provides apartment-style living for low-income seniors, and we're helping to restock their emergency pantry. So please bring any non-perishable food item or laundry supplies, any of those things, to 7575 East Speedway Boulevard between the hours of 10 and 2 on Friday, and get a free glass of lemonade served by yours truly.
Okay, well, let's give Kat the most enthusiastic appreciation and welcome. We're blessed to have you, Kat.
Thank you guys so much.